Game 4 between OKC and Denver just finished up. That was a crazy game. Real brick fest between both teams. I think in the first quarter, both teams were combined like 1 for 30 from three. Low scoring affair, defensive affair. But OKC ended up coming out on top, tying the series up at 2-2. Who's actually going to win this series and why? Let's talk about it. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Court Vision. Like I said in today's video, I'm going to be going over my thoughts from the first four games we've seen versus this out of this OKC versus Denver second round series. Without further ado, let's jump into it. The first big narrative that everybody loves to talk about in this series has been Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and his kind of really odd form that we've seen. And it's justified. He's been having a really up and down series. Game 2, he looked really good, very excellent, very patient, very composed, getting to his spots. But in the other three games, it was a lot less good. In game 2, he was 11 for 13 from the field, almost 100% true shooting. But across the other three, he was 27 for 67 and sub 50% true shooting. So not great efficiency. Denver's sending a lot of double teams, blitzing him super frequently. He's trying to take him out of the game. And so he's had to pass out a lot and been forced into a lot of these really difficult shots. The pressure that he's seeing on the ball and the extra bodies that he's seeing in the paint on his drives are making him really uncomfortable and are messing with a lot of his rhythm on his mid-range pull-up, which is his go-to shot. He'll get to his spot in the mid-range, at the free throw line at the elbow or whatever, but there will be three guys around him contesting him as he gets into his shooting motion. Christian Braun has also been really physical with him, has done a great job making him uncomfortable as the primary defender as well. But beyond that, he's also forced up a lot of like early shot clock threes on step backs or whatever, even if he has space to drive in certain spots. And he's shot really poorly on these. He's just 4 for 19 from three in the series on almost exclusively these step backs and these pull-ups. It feels like he's not comfortable trying to drive sometimes, which is why he's putting these shots up. But at other times, it looks like he's almost too aggressive. So it's really hard to get a read on his mindset. Beyond his poor scoring, though, his playmaking has been excellent, in my opinion. When he's seeing these bodies and he has to pass, he's been making those simple plays almost every time. He's generating a ton of great open looks for his teammates off of him getting doubled or getting blitzed in pick and roll. In the pick and roll, he's able to find his roller really well a lot. In games 3 and 4 especially, it felt like he was really patient in those pick and rolls. He was anticipating the double team and waiting for that pocket pass to open up to find his roll man. And Hartenstein then was able to find really good kick out plays on the short roll. In crunch time of these games, he looks like he's really laser focused on trying to score, not so much passing, which has been good in some spots and really bad in other spots. In game 3, it was really bad. He had a stretch of ISO possessions in the fourth quarter there that didn't end up resulting in good shots. People were very critical of him for that. But in game 4, it was a little better. He was able to find his way to the rim sometimes. He was more willing to make those passes, initiating ball movement. And that was part of why OKC executed in that fourth quarter much better than they did in the rest of the series. But that leads me into my next point, which has been the clutch time execution favoring Denver a ton in this series. In the clutch time situations in game 1 and game 3, Denver absolutely played better, but game 4 was a little bit of a different story. Game 1, we all know what happened with the fouling up 3. Personally, I didn't hate that. The math does say that it is the right thing to do most of the time, and I understand the logic behind it. The bigger problem for me was that OKC in those situations, late in the games, were so heavily reliant on Shai or Jada being able to create in isolation. It was a lot of flat sets or clear outs for those guys. They just weren't able to convert on a lot of them. And guys also were not knocking down the shots that were generated for them in those clutch situations off of those guys. Not to single out Isaiah Hartenstein, but in game 3, he missed like 3 wide open floaters on the dump off from Shai in the fourth quarter of that game, just as an example. So just all around the board, I didn't love the game plan and I didn't love the execution from OKC. But in game 4, they began to run some more actions, get more into their ball movement off of Shai in screen actions with like Caruso screening for him a lot or Hartenstein sometimes. And they actually came out on top in that game. In the fourth quarter, they held Denver to just 18 points, so their defense was executing very well, but they scored 29 of their own points in that fourth quarter, which was their highest scoring quarter of that game for them. So just seeing them able to execute offensively, in that fourth quarter, despite it being a poor offensive game for them overall, was really encouraging going forward in the series. For the Nuggets, Jamal and Jokic, their two-man game was really effective in those late game situations in game 1 and 3. But in game 4, OKC was defending it really, really super well. They were navigating those screens, fighting through, and something I saw shifted in their game plan is they were in those clutch time situations conceding those threes to guys like Christian Brown or Russell Westbrook in order to send extra help on the two-man action, which worked much better, made them much more uncomfortable. Jamal wasn't able to get free for his mid-range jumpers or whatever, and Jokic wasn't super able to work into the post. Speaking of Jokic, he's not having a great series, and I think that's partially because of how OKC is defending him. Nobody's really talking about Jokic's form in this series, but outside of game 1, where he went nuclear with the 40-point game or whatever, he's only averaging 23, 12, and 5 on 21 for 63 shooting, so 33% from the field. 23 and 12 for anyone else is great, but for Jokic, it's not nearly what we'd expect, and it's well below what he's been showing us in this postseason. I think OKC's defense on him in games 2, 3, and 4 has been great. On his post touches, they like to have either Isaiah Hartenstein or Jalen Williams, the big one, on him, who's been playing more minutes, specifically to have that big physical body on Jokic when Hartenstein's out of the game. And then they keep other guys staying at home more, to prevent those passes to the cutters and shooters that Jokic really loves to find, which has limited his playmaking. And then they'll also have, Chet usually helping more off of the weak side, shading over to have that extra length at the rim if Jokic, is able to spin off the primary matchup. Even before he catches the ball, they're also doing a great job denying him position in the post. His defender, whoever it is, if he gets switched onto a smaller defender or if it's the big guy, they'll have them wrestle with him off ball to try and prevent him getting that position inside for a catch. Denver's responded by curling him off screens inside the 3-point line to get him those catches inside. But his ability to kind of work towards the rim against the extra physical defense and the rim help has been noticeably worse. Nuggets fans will say that it's the refs screwing him over. He's not getting foul calls. Neither team is really getting foul calls. I don't necessarily agree with that narrative, but since he's having more trouble getting to the rim and getting to his floaters and whatever, he's taking a lot more jumpers, especially those face-up jumpers in the mid-range off those catches, which he hasn't been hitting at a very high clip. On top of those face-up jumpers, he's also taking a ton of threes, which aren't falling for him. He's 6 for 28 this series from outside the arc. This combination of him working more on the perimeter, looking for his threes more often, and then being less able to get to his consistent floater in the paint has resulted in his efficiency being really poor, despite OKC not throwing tons of bodies at him, which means that they're more free to deny him passing as well. So his scoring is suffering, and because of that, his playmaking is suffering. The most interesting thing for me, though, in this series is how OKC is really beating Denver at their own game. Denver loves to run in transition. They love to score in the paint. These are the two things that they've been top of the league in for the past couple seasons, but OKC is beating them in both this series. If you look at fast break points across the series, OKC is winning 77-43. And then if you don't count game 1 where it was fairly even, OKC is winning 50-19 in fast break points. Part of that's just because they forced so many turnovers, but OKC has really made an effort to push pace and attack in transition, while simultaneously Denver hasn't been able as much to get out and run because OKC is getting back so well, denying those opportunities. And then when you look at the paint points, it's also really striking. OKC is beating Denver in paint points 184-134. And then again, if you don't count game 1 where it was more even, it's 138-80. So huge advantage in paint points for OKC. Denver's loves to score in the paint. They're one of the lowest frequency jump shot teams in the league. But in this series, OKC's generally been able to hold them out of the paint, force them to take a lot more jumpers with their help defense, their on-ball defenders staying in front, denying those paint touches. The games that Denver has won, they've been winning those games in a way that they haven't really been winning games all season. Not to say that they can't continue to win these games in this way, but it's just not typically the style we associate with the Nikola Jokic Nuggets. One other thing to consider is the 3-point variance, especially for OKC. They're shooting really poorly in this series, just 32% from outside. And a lot of their misses have been really, really wide open. Shea, especially generating a ton of threes, drawing doubles. Guys are just not knocking down those opportunities. And these are guys who are typically good shooters, but just not knocking them down. Shea, who is this season a 40% 3-point shooter, 4 for 22, 4 for 19. Lou Dort's been really bad from outside, despite having a career year from three. He's just 8 for 32 in this series. And then J-Dub, who's also a pretty decent 3-point shooter, is only 5 for 24. Those are their 3 highest volume 3-point shooters. They're all having really rough efficiency in this series from outside. So if that comes back up, that's another thing that will benefit OKC. Kind of to summarize my thoughts, I think OKC has generally just played a better series outside of those clutch time situations, and the 3-point variance definitely didn't help them either. And then when you look at those clutch time issues, they've gotten better with each, clutch situation that they've played. Game 1 was bad. Game 3 was not great. But Game 4, they actually came out on top in the late game situation. Shea's form is another concern for them, but he's also improved with every game. And he had that Game 2 where he looked great. So all of that considered, I think OKC is going to end up taking this series. I predicted them from the start, and after Denver went up 2-1, it looked a little shaky, but they found a way to win in Game 4. And just thinking about all of this stuff, especially, OKC being able to beat Denver in transition and beat Denver in the paint. If OKC's winning all of that and the 3-point variance comes a little back up, I don't see a way that OKC really loses this series unless Jokic finds a way to get back up to form. That's all I've got in this one. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Like the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you in the next one.